So I don't know about you, but I just thought this movie was absolutely charming, but also kind of like dark and serious at the same time.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's kind of hit some interesting notes.
When I was watching it, I even thought to myself, like, man, this is a Rich movie. This is like a movie that Rich would really like. I liked it too. I mean, I liked it too.
Yeah.
I was like, man,
it's
this is
right up my alley.
This is right up Rich's alley.
Well, Irish accents I already kind of like, and of course the one that comes to mind with both the Irish accents and then with the children protagonists is In America, which I've probably had you watch before. Yeah, I would say it's definitely kind of in that vein, although with an even more serious streak, or at least a larger agenda, maybe, or a bigger story.
Right.
A bigger story. It's like, so In America has the family drama, and that's basically the whole story. This has the family drama set against, and the reason we are talking about the film Belfast today at all, set against an actual historical period called the Troubles in Northern Ireland.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting how, because it was a child protagonist and kind of the story's told not entirely, but mostly from Buddy, the little boy's point of view, that like the stuff like the riots and the troubles going on at the time, like the stakes of that are just as high as the stakes of him like getting a good grade on his math test.
So he can sit next to the cute girl,
like,
right?
Those two things are equally important to him. Yeah,
and you're right. It's interesting how a kid can't differentiate between the importance, I guess, or or you're looking at the big picture. There's no big picture for this kid, and I do want to give the background of this kind of the situation here in Northern Ireland, but first I do want to mention, so this was written and directed by Kenneth Branagh, but I didn't know that until the end. So I watched the whole movie basically just because it was supposed to be a Best Picture contender and it was at the theater, so I'm like, I'm going to go see it. Like, that's all I knew, other than, I think it's in black and white. Like, I didn't know anything about it. I didn't know if it was set 100 years ago. I didn't know if it was set today. I had no idea what it was about. And so then I didn't know further until the credits rolled at the end. Oh, it was Kenneth Branagh directing it. And then I didn't know until another week later that it's based on his life experience.
Yeah.
So I actually didn't know all that until like way after the fact, which
okay.
I think that adds so much to it to know that the little kid is essentially a proxy for Kenneth Branagh himself, like almost exactly.
Yeah, and so that's interesting because I did know that stuff before going to see it. I think because we had briefly talked about it. So I knew all that stuff going in, and I had even seen. I had got a YouTube video recommended to me where it was a Kenneth Branagh's interview with Stephen Colbert, where he was talking about how it's like, and the stuff that he mentions as being like things that happened to him in his life are like point for point the plot of the movie. Like, I was growing up in Belfast, and then there was this big like riot on our street, and they attacked a bunch of Catholic houses, and there was this girl in school that he liked, and he had to move away when he was like a little kid. I mean, it really is maybe not the exact story is not necessarily like autobiographical because it's a kid named Buddy. It's not a kid named Kenneth Branagh, but like the broad strokes are basically his childhood at that time.
Well, and it's just combining it. I think you're combining things that happen over the course of several years into like one summer or 1 year.
Yeah,
and I think the comparison might be Almost Famous with Cameron Crowe.
Sure.
Where a lot of that, I mean, that stuff didn't all, Stillwater's a fictional band, and that stuff didn't all happen on one trip, but most of those things in Almost Famous did happen to Cameron Crowe over the course of like 3 or 4 years.
Right, yeah.
And so it's very similar here, like even like, he had an older brother, and then his mom gets pregnant when he's 9 with this what will be his sister, like, those beats that's Kenneth Branagh's life,
right.
And like, even down to, and ending up with like the box of soap awkwardly in the middle of a riot. Like, he's like, no, that happened.
Yeah.
Like, all those little things.
And stuff like that is like that's too good. You
can't write that.
Exactly.
Yeah,
you can't make that stuff up. Like, that's something that is like only bizarre enough to happen in real life.
What does he even say about the soap? He's like, it's organic or whatever.
It's biological.
It's biological, which is basically the late 60s version of organic, I'm sure, or whatever. So yes, great film. Definitely like the whole made you laugh, made you cry kind of film. And it's a weird one too. since this is an Oscar contender, I'm actually not sure when we're going to release this episode. The movie is out, but I might try to wait until it's starting to get nominated for awards before we drop this episode. But if you haven't seen it yet, go see it. I don't think it's a movie where spoilers matter.
No.
Really? Yeah. I mean, and we're going to talk about the historical things, but we're actually not going to really focus on Kenneth Branagh himself. We're going to focus on the troubles in Northern Ireland. Anyway, so take it with a grain of salt. I don't think we can really spoil this. It's not a plot point kind of movie. Like, we could tell you beat by beat exactly what happens, but you have to experience it and see the performances and what the characters are going through. It's not a spoiler to find out, oh, so-and-so dies, so-and-so moves, so-and-so does this. And, like, it doesn't change your experience on a movie like this to know where it's going.
Yeah, I think it's mostly, like, seeing the actual visuals in the movie, which I think are really cool, but also, like, the performances are the biggest part. Like, we can tell you, oh, you know, I think they're... character names are actually like Pop and Grady. I don't think we actually
I don't think they even named anybody.
Taryn Hines and Judi Dench, like we can tell you that, oh, like their relationship, you know, is really beautiful, but like that's not going to do it justice. You have to watch it in the movie. Like, you have to see those performances.
So the emotional climax for me was just, and I just lost it, was because it seems so weird. Like, I don't even understand like how the film had built up to that point, but after the funeral they jump to just kind of a party where actually I think it's a living wake even.
Yeah.
And they're like singing and dancing. That's it. And I just start bawling. And I like,
he's like singing the karaoke with the band and his wife's dancing. Yeah. That is a really touching scene.
Yeah. Like, I'm getting chills just now. Like, there's nothing I can say that can spoil for why it has that impact. It's just you have to have been on the ride with the characters up to that point.
Yeah.
And again, this is a favorite for Best Picture. Again, it may not win, but it's almost certainly going to be nominated for Best Picture, and Kenneth Branagh for Best Director and all those kinds of things.
I'm sure
so
at least one, if not multiple, acting nominations too.
Right.
Like, every performance in this movie just crushes it. I was actually really impressed with the kid. For real,
this is his first movie. And he destroyed it.
And when I was going in, I was like, ugh, like, and I do this all the time. I do this all the time though when I'm going to see a movie with a child protagonist. It's like, God, like child actors, you know, God damn it, like I have to sit here and, you know, because it's like, the lead is usually like pretty good. Because, like, they get cast as a lead, but, like, the supporting characters are usually all right, eye roll, you know, general child actor stuff. But not this movie. Like, the kid, Jude Hill, the main kid, is awesome. He's so good. But even, like, the other, like, his friends all have, like, his older brother gives, I mean, he's not on screen a ton, but gives a pretty good performance. The older girl that's, like, trying to get him to join a gang or whatever, she's really good. The performances of this movie were just amazing.
No, I think I get the skepticism over child actors, but I also think, man, when it works, it's almost like it works even more. Again, I go back to In America. I think Whale Rider. I think Jojo Rabbit. And when you get those good Sing Street, when you get those, and they're a little older, but yeah, you're right. When it works, it really works. So let's hit reset here. And so this film is set, and actually it even opens, it actually opens with a overview in color of modern Belfast,
I was gonna say
which makes you think you're in the wrong film.
Well, no, I was going to say that just the beginning, like 45 seconds of this movie makes me want to go like visit Belfast on vacation. Like, it looks super cool, the way that it's shot and all the cool like murals and stuff to the show. Like, Belfast looks badass. I've never been to Belfast. Have you been to Belfast?
No, I've been to Dublin a couple of times, but I've not been to Belfast. I basically haven't been outside of Dublin.
It looks super cool. It looks awesome.
Oh no, yeah, I could spend a month in Ireland, I'm sure, no problem. So yes, for those who don't know, to this day, you have Northern Ireland is separate from Ireland because Northern Ireland is actually part of the United Kingdom. So we've talked about before, and it does get confusing with all the geography and political stuff, but the island of Great Britain has on it England, Scotland, and Wales. And then when you join those three with Northern Ireland, the four countries make up the United Kingdom.
Right.
That's the kind of the simple way to see it.
The full name is the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland.
Right, because exactly, it's the island of Great Britain and the northern part of Ireland. Yeah. And so, those are the things that make up the United Kingdom. So it goes back forever, and just because I like to sometimes, I go way back. So there's been people on Ireland since even before the Americas were populated. So people had made it to, which makes sense, it's closer. So people made it, if we're starting out in Africa, people made it to Ireland long before they made it to the Americas. You have, prehistorically, you have all the Celtic and Gaelic tribes that were dominant before Christianity showed up, and Christianity showed up in like the 4th century. There was actually a few missionaries and maybe even churches and stuff before St. Patrick, but St. Patrick was, the person who really got Christianity to blow up in Ireland. He arrived in 432 CE. And so historically, there are kind of 4 regions, states, provinces in Ireland, and what is now Northern Ireland corresponds with Ulster. Right. And I forget off the top of my head what the other 3 were, but Ulster is now Northern Ireland. So the Normans in 1066 take England, and then in the generations that followed, they also took over Ireland. And that's kind of the first time you have England going over and taking control in Ireland.
It was Henry II, right? Wasn't he the first? He was like the first, because William the Conqueror didn't make it to Ireland.
No,
but
right.
Henry II, I think, was the first English monarch to start conquering there.
Okay, and I forget the exact timeline there, but that sounds about right, because it was about 100 years after William the Conqueror. And it kind of, the control kind of ebbs and flows, and the Gaelic culture reemerges. But then as the Tudors actually then come in and do the kind of the final squashing and fully incorporating Ireland as basically being, no, this is part of England. Mm-hmm. And that led to something called the Flight of the Earls, especially in Ulster. So like a lot of the high-ranking Irish native nobles, the more, the Gaelic ones, just left. And so that kind of leaves this vacuum where now the Tudors could place a lot of loyal Protestant, Scottish, and English lords into what was Ulster and becomes Northern Ireland. So that's how over the centuries you have this distinct Catholic Protestant split in Northern Ireland because of basically the English influence, and then the colonists that followed the lords and stuff over there. So you still have a heavy Catholic presence in Northern Ireland, to this day, right. But it basically gave the Protestants now were the majority in Northern Ireland.
There have been, over the centuries, numerous what they call plantations, where they're like basically just like importing as many Englishmen and Scots as they can into Ireland. But like the big one is called the Ulster Plantation, which was James I. Just like really was heavy on get as many people into Ulster, as many Protestants as possible, because he was Protestant into Northern Ireland, and that's why today that region of historically Ulster, but today Northern Ireland is like the big Protestant. Even though there are a bunch of Catholics there, that's why it's predominantly Protestant even today.
Right, whereas the rest of Ireland
is almost entirely Catholic.
Right. And I think I mentioned it before. Maybe it was in the When the Shakes the Barley episode, or maybe even before that. But so my mom's mom would always talk about how her family, her ancestors were Scotch-Irish. She was just always talking about being that Scotch-Irish. And so like that's what it goes back to. It's these Scottish immigrants into Northern Ireland who then, when those people 100 years later came to the United States, that was, my grandma's people with names like McClure and Abercrombie and all that was these, Scotch-Irish people. So then you get to the 20th century and Ireland's starting to talk about home rule. Again, this is kind of what we talked about in When the Shakes the Barley, and they want to kick the English out. But Northern Ireland sees, quote, home rule as Rome rule. Like, well, then the Catholics are just going to run the whole country, and where do we end up? Yeah. We want to stay with the United Kingdom. Like, we don't want the Catholics telling us how to run everything up here in Ulster/Northern Ireland.
And just like there was, Protestant on Catholic violence in Northern Ireland, they were, probably rightly worried that if all of a sudden, boom, Ireland is in the entire island of Ireland is its own country, and we're just kind of like stuck here away from Great Britain, like there could be, some retaliatory violence. Not to make a direct comparison, but like in Hotel Rwanda, where there's like the minority are oppressing the majority, and then all of a sudden the power shifts And it's like,
it's open season.
Now there's more of us, and we're in power. Like, just, stand by for massacres.
Right. And then it can't help but think of then South Africa and how the only reason we didn't see that in South Africa is because Nelson Mandela prevented it.
100%.
Yeah.
Yep.
So then in 1920, the UK issued something called the Government of Ireland Act, basically establishing a Northern Ireland and a Southern Ireland. But this is all about the time that Southern Ireland is basically giving them the middle finger. So Northern Ireland does stick, but then Southern Ireland just ends up becoming the Republic of Ireland. And again, that's super simplistic. We talked about a little more detail how there's Irish Civil War. There's so much more that goes into that, but for purposes of our story here, Southern Ireland just becomes the Republic of Ireland, and Northern Ireland is Northern Ireland as part of the United Kingdom. And as we've mentioned, inevitably there are Catholics living in Northern Ireland who had to deal with being gerrymandered out. So they're not an insignificant percentage of the population. So let's say they're 30 to 40% of the population, but then the gerrymandering is going on by the Protestants to make sure they can't vote, or they're not getting representation in government, because again, they're being gerrymandered out like we see in the United States today. Yeah. So this leads to in the 1960s, you get into a lot of civil rights protests where the minority Catholics in Northern Ireland are protesting for equal rights and basically to get rid of anti-Catholic discrimination practices that are rampant throughout the country. And these protests are met with resistance by the police who try to silence them, and tensions are building throughout the 60s, which finally break out into riots in August of 1969, which is when the film begins. And I didn't really kind of follow exactly how this was in the film, but again, the film just kind of shows it really through the eyes of the kids. Yeah, the adults kind of talk about what's going on, but like you don't necessarily get the exact details. Like all of a sudden just barricades are up, and it's like, oh, okay, where'd these come from? But so the British Army was sent in to maintain order, and these, quote, peace walls were erected to kind of cordon off different communities and stuff. But I guess I didn't really get from the film the sense that these were a British military presence that had come over. I didn't really get that sense. Or did they mention that in the film?
Yeah, they show that in the... It's one of the shots where it's like they show the news on the TV, and they're talking about the British military force that has come to Northern Ireland. It's a pretty quick thing because it's like they're talking about it on the TV and like the mom goes to turn it off.
Gotcha. And it's been a month since I've seen it and you saw it yesterday.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's a good point too. Yeah. So I guess for people listening, Rich saw this a while ago and I just saw it yesterday, so it's a little more fresh in my mind.
And then, and then the film doesn't get into the exact details. It just kind of shows that there's this tension. It kind of deals with the dad. So the main kid, the Branagh proxy, they're Protestant, but they couldn't care less. They love their Catholic neighbors. They literally couldn't care less who's Catholic and who's Protestant. They just consider everybody their neighbors.
Right.
But then they're getting pressure. And again, a word they don't use in the film that you totally would see used today is the thug that's trying to basically coerce their dad to like pick a side. You're either going to help us fight the Catholics or you're against us and you're going to go down. And I'm like, this guy's a terrorist. And they're just not using the word terrorist because it wasn't really necessarily in the vernacular in the same way in the 60s and in the early 70s, the way we would use it today. But that's exactly what this guy is. He's a Protestant terrorist who's basically wanting everyone to be on his side and join in to get these bloody Catholics. Yep. And of course, we see how the main kid's family is just like, I say rolling their eyes, but it's so much more serious than that. There's so much more at stake when you're literally talking about violence on their street. And it's so frustrating. It's so frustrating to see what they're having to go through.
And Kenneth Branagh in the interview that he did with Stephen Colbert that I saw, he even talks about that, about how it was like the whole time that he was growing up, it was like their whole neighborhood was like all one big family, like their whole street, which you see in the show in the movie at the very beginning.
Absolutely. He can go to anybody's house and he's welcome for dinner at any time.
All the doors are open, like everyone's,
right. The whole village raising a child kind of thing.
Talking to each other, just hanging out. And then all of a sudden there's this there's riot where they smash up all the Catholic houses. And then and we see them build those big walls at the end of the street with like pallets and a burnt out car. And in that interview, Kenneth Branagh said that they even like pulled up the pavers on the street and used those to build the wall.
Oh, huh.
And so it was like, it's this almost like a loss of innocence thing too, where it was like, before it was like this nice peaceful neighborhood, and then all of a sudden just one violent day and now it's like lockdown. And he even said that was like a big one of the big like pushes for him to make this movie was going into COVID lockdown at the beginning of 2020. Brought back a lot of those feelings and those memories of being locked down in his house with his family as a kid, not because of a disease, but because of riots and stuff.
But yes, this actually led to, so it wasn't like this was just, a few months or a couple years of disturbances. This actually was the beginning of a 30-year period in Northern Ireland called the Troubles.
Yep.
And this kind of stuff, again, it was just, there was never one, it was just basically so many different events, and it's kind of weird to even get your head around it. So it was never a full-on war, and so over the course of 30 years, about 3,500 people were killed, which if you think about, a 9/11, where, basically that many people were killed in one day, it sounds like, it wasn't that big a deal. But it was, because it's just these little skirmishes here and there, and things like mass shootings. The mass shootings added up to 3,500 people over the course of 30 years. We'd be like, holy cow, that's insane. That's basically what this was.
So it's like 100 people roughly a year.
Yeah. But in countless incidents, it wasn't like 1,000 in this incident. It's 5 here, 3 there, to add up to 3,500 over 30 years. So it finally came about, and we'll get to it more here. So basically, you end up in 1998 getting the Good Friday Agreement, which remarkably, again, nothing's ever simple, but it really did put an end to the violence that we saw. Like the trouble, again, there's always going to be outlier events and things like that, but it really helped. And I couldn't even really get my finger on why it was so significant. I think it was just that they finally put on the table the issues of all sides, and just let's just finally address what are the issues that the Catholics are having? What are the issues that the Protestants are having? How do we disarm everyone while also addressing the concerns of both sides in a way that everyone can agree to? And they signed off on it, and the fighting has stopped since then. So basically, I didn't understand the details beyond that. Like, it didn't seem like there was like some big change that happened other than they finally got everyone to listen to each other and talk to each other and just say, hey, if you do this, we'll do this. And everyone's like, yeah, that's fair. And it stopped. It just seems so crazy that this worked, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah. Going back to the conflict stuff. So did we talk about Bloody Sunday, the big massacre?
No, I have that on here. Yeah,
okay,
go ahead, yeah.
So over the course of history, there are 22 incidents that are called Bloody Sunday. There's like one from like the Boer War. There's like one from the Russian Revolution. So 22 of these events all over the world that are referred to as Bloody Sunday, and 5 of them are in Ireland.
Oh, yeah. But yes, the one in 1972, just a couple years after the film here, is the one where British soldiers shot 26 unarmed protesters, and I think about half of them died. And that is the one that U2 sings about when they're talking about Bloody Sunday.
Right,
is the 1972 incident.
Yeah, that's like the most famous one.
And that's actually a big issue too. So in theory, so initially, when you've had these first initial riots, initially the Catholics are like, oh, good, the British will come in and be a neutral arbitrating force that kind of are like, unbiased because they're not Irish, but they're Protestant.
Right.
So very quickly, the Catholics realized, oh, well, the British soldiers aren't actually helping at all because they see us as beneath.
Well, and also too, this problem where the military was like the most readily available solution, but definitely not the best solution, because like the soldiers that they're sending in they weren't trained to deal with any of this. They weren't trained to deal with rioters and like unarmed protesters and like crowd control. Like they're a sledgehammer, and it's like to a hammer, every problem looks like a nail. So like, what do you do if you're just some random, some 19-year-old infantry soldier, some grunt in the British military, and all of a sudden you have, you're standing there and some guy's throwing rocks at you and your only tool is a rifle. Like,
what's going to happen?
Right. And that's not to say that like shooting unarmed people is good or justifiable, but like, it's easy to understand how that situation happened when you put a bunch of inexperienced, not trained for that situation, scared kids in that scenario, and they're gonna, bad stuff is gonna happen. And that's how you end up with, 26 unarmed civilians getting killed.
Right, and the emotions of the moment.
Yeah,
nothing is justified when it comes to this kind of violence. But when you're there in the heat of the moment, it's a whole different thing than us kind of talking 50 years after the fact.
Of course.
So yes, and then in kind of retaliation or in response to the biased British presence, you end up with a lot of these influential paramilitary groups like the IRA, which had existed previously, or the different versions of it that existed going back, to the, When the Shakes the Barley in the 19-teens. But you definitely get a resurgence of these groups trying to end British rule in Northern Ireland.
Well, and there were also, similarly, there were Protestant paramilitary groups as well.
Yes. Yes.
It wasn't just a conflict between like the official British military and the IRA. Like there were multiple paramilitary groups on both sides that were also fighting each other. Like it was a mess.
Well, and you even get like it wasn't even exclusively on the religious lines too. You would have Protestants joining up with the IRA to get rid of the British, and that's a minority thing. But like those kinds of things would happen too. And so in broad strokes, yes, most Irish Republicans who wanted the British gone were on the Catholic side, and most so-called Unionists were the Protestant and a little more pro-British, because, again, if the Brits that come in to kind of arbitrate and keep the peace are on your side, you're a little more okay with them being there, even if it was your side that was kind of doing the bullying.
And then there was also involvement from American organized crime groups who were providing gun. Yeah, because if you think about it, it's a lot easier to get guns in the United States than it is to get them in the UK.
Right.
And so they would get guns from the United States and like sell them in Ireland for a lot of money because they're hard to get there. So if you can provide those, like you can make a bunch of money for your criminal enterprise here in the US. And that's just another interesting connection.
Yeah.
Another whole aspect to that conflict that's kind of interesting.
And then this wasn't a great movie by any means, but I did see it in the theater in 1997, which is kind of an interesting year if you think about it being a year before the Good Friday Agreements, is The Devil's Own with Harrison Ford and Brad Pitt. And I just remember it kind of being set, and again, I haven't seen it since then, so it's been 24 years since I saw this in the theater, and I'm just kind of going off of memory. But the fact that this one line kind of really sticks out in my mind, and I think that I would guess that Brad Pitt's character was a Northern Ireland Catholic, and he talks about his family or his friends or whatever getting killed, and Harrison Ford's like, oh man, well, did they get the bastards? And without missing a beat, Brad Pitt character says, they are the bastards. And I'm just like, oh, just such a good line that kind of then highlights, what was going on here at the time.
Yeah.
And then so because this is so modern, the statistics are insane. Like, I could probably name off the 3,500 people who were killed. Like, it's not like when we talk about this stuff from 800 years ago, roughly 10,000 to 100,000 people might have died in this rough region.
Yeah.
It's like, no, these 3,500 people, and I'm even rounding that off, obviously. But we have the stats on who was killed and by who and when and everything. So about 60% were killed by the Republican/Catholic side. About 30% were killed by the Loyalist/Union/Protestant side. And about 10% were killed by British soldiers. So that kind of gives you a breakdown of who was doing what. But again, remember, it's tricky too. So it's like, oh, well, the Catholics were actually doing the most killing, but it's also they're kind of the most repressed group that kind of led to this outbreak in the beat. So they're the ones kind of lashing out because of the treatment they had been receiving for decades too. Again, not to justify violence, but it's because this was kind of winding down in the night, or actually building to a negotiation in the 90s. And I remember, I'm in middle school in like the early 90s, and this was in the news. It's like, oh my gosh, there's just like Catholic school kids getting killed on the way to walking to school, and there's these walls up dividing up, Ireland, and it just seems so sad, and like there was never going to be an end because people just couldn't stop hurting people who weren't part of their group. And
a lot of the division, a lot of these wounds had kind of been pretty well shut for the last 20 or so years up until recently. A lot of these sentiments of, division and nationalism and stuff were reignited during Brexit.
Yes. And basically there was concerns of, does Brexit now lead to a reignition of these tensions.
Because the Republic of Ireland is still part of the EU.
Right.
And with the UK leaving the EU, there were fears that, now there's going to be a hard border again between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland, which I don't think that is the case.
I think they were able to keep it softer. Yeah.
I'm pretty sure there's some sort of agreement. I'm not super educated on the updates of the Brexit situation right now, but I think everyone can see that is a bad idea.
Yeah, and I guess that's something. I don't remember reading that specifically on the Good Friday Agreement page that I was reading, but I do think, just from memory, a big thing that is the softening of the border. And you see this throughout the world, where you put up a wall or a fence and say this side is this side and this side and the other side is the other side. It actually it increases the groupthink and kind of othering of the other people on the other side of that wall, and it actually increases tension. So you put up the wall and it increases tension, versus if you have a softer border and let people kind of freely go between the two groups, everyone's way more chill, and it actually reduces violence. So you see this throughout the world. So that is also a big part of what helped stop the violence.
Especially somewhere like Ireland, where you have people that live on one side and work on the other. If you know.
Yes.
Putting aside the ethno-nationalist tensions that would be heightened by the hardening of a border, just the massive inconvenience for a big number of the population.
No, right. And I had no intention of bringing up the U.S.-Mexico border wall or lack thereof, or attempts to put that up. But one of the many issues with that is no, there are both Mexicans and Americans who cross the Mexican-American border every day to go to work. That's just the inevitability of two countries being next to each other, and towns are towns, and that's a thing. That's normal. People just live on one side and go work on the other side, and then go back home for the evening. Happens on anywhere there's borders. Yeah, we kind of talked about it. That's basically, I guess, we went all the way from first people on Ireland thousands of years ago to present day with Brexit. So yeah, I think we kind of covered everything there. Branagh himself, again, I'll say I don't want to spoil the movie, but I'll just say that when Kenneth Branagh was about 9 years old, his family did move to England to escape the Troubles.
Right.
And he then soon got into school plays and acquired a more English accent to kind of help stave off bullies. It wasn't necessarily intentional. It might have almost been subconscious, but that's kind of why he doesn't have an Irish accent today. He sounds more British, but he still considers himself very much Irish.
They specifically address that in the movie, though.
Do they talk about that? Yeah, okay. Oh, that they will be bullied. Right.
Well, the whole just the difference in accent is brought up. It's brought up by the mom. She talks about the monologue when she's on the bus with Jamie Dornan's character before he goes to the airport to go back to, because in the movie the dad works in England, but his family lives in Belfast.
Right. So he goes over for a couple weeks and is able to come back for the weekend and then get back to work for 2 weeks.
Right. But she's talking about, because he says, my job is gonna give us a house and a place to live, and I'd really like to not have my kids grow up in the middle of this this brewing civil war. And she talks about how Ireland is our home, and if we go to live in England, then we're gonna sound different. People are gonna know we're Irish. She said half of them are gonna look down on us and the other half are gonna hate us because it's their kids that are the soldiers that are coming over here that are then dying. And that there's this she gives this really emotional, tear-filled monologue that's all one shot, uncut. That is a really, really powerful scene. If she gets nominated for a supporting actress,
it's for that scene. Yeah.
Probably a lead actress role. It's that's the scene they're going to show on the reel at the Oscars when she gets nominated.
No, yeah. The whole thing is just kind of powerful performance after powerful performance, and normally we would kind of talk about all the accolades that a film has racked up, but this one's so new that it hasn't got them yet. So on Rotten Tomatoes, it's an 86/91, and I'm actually baffled that it's as low as an 86 on the critics' side.
Yeah, I saw a couple negative reviews that were it doesn't translate to today. Like, it doesn't, there's no connection to today. And
there's like, nothing but connections to today.
Well, I thought that was kind of missing the point. Like, it's not supposed to be about today. It's supposed to be, it's like Kenneth Branagh's love letter to his childhood. It's not.
No, yeah. I'm seeing stuff here of negative reviews basically saying like, oh, well, it's not quite nostalgia and it's not quite historical commentary. So it's kind of neither. So it's not, so it doesn't work. And I'm like, yeah, I disagree. Yeah, I don't see any, I guess you could argue there are legitimate criticisms, but I think those are, ticky-tacky things that I thought it worked so well.
I guess
it could border on melodrama, but I think it earns everything through the sheer brilliance of the performances and the script.
The stuff that I thought was kind of like, not necessarily took me out of it, but like the whole movie. At the very beginning of the movie, they're shooting all these scenes, or shooting all these locations in modern-day Belfast that are all in full color.
Yeah.
Then it goes up, the camera does this pan up and over a wall, and does, something that I love, which is a really long, uncut shot where it goes up and over the wall, transitions into black and white, and then follows all these people around this street for a couple minutes with no cuts, which I love.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, okay, it's going back into black and white. That's a choice that he made, I guess, for the nostalgia reason. I'm not really sure 100% why that creative choice was made, but it was a choice. I was fine with it. I'm fine with it. I'm not, I don't have like the same aversion to black and white that like Cody Giefer does. But so the whole movie's in black and white, but then like every once in a while, like when they go to see A Christmas Carol, the stage play, for some reason, the stage play is in full color, including the reflection of the play in Judi Dench's glasses.
See, I love that. I love that touch.
Okay, it looks cool, but why? Like, why do that?
I guess you could I guess I was kind of seeing, maybe this is me reading too much into it, but I kind of see that as it's a past versus present. I mean, that's the glimpse. That's Kenneth Branagh. You're seeing like this is the past and the nostalgic version and the history of the kid and of this time in Ireland versus the future where this kid is going to end up on stage and in the theater, and the modern world of this kid is reflected in the color of the stage and the screen. Like, I guess.
Okay.
I don't know.
That makes sense. I just didn't when I saw it, I was like, oh, that's in color. I wonder why. Gotcha. I wonder what that's all about.
Gotcha. Okay, I liked it, but I don't know if my explanation is what Kenneth Branagh would say. And I haven't heard him address that in the interviews.
I also really liked, and this is again something else where you can see Kenneth Branagh like really demonstrating his love for film, especially the films that he grew up on, which the big movies at the time in the 60s, especially American exports, were all Westerns.
Oh, yeah.
And so we see, like, The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance.
Yes.
Like, we see, like, a full... There's, like, an entire section of a scene from that movie that's, like, full screen. Not like it's a shot of a TV playing the movie. It's just a section... The entire screen is that movie, which I thought was really cool. There's a lot of, like, musical homages to Westerns in this movie. There's multiple, like, standoff scenes where they get, like, the real close-up like you would see in, Fistful of Dollars. Man, I really loved the allusions and homages to movie Westerns in Belfast. I thought those were super cool. I really like those.
Yeah, and I'm just looking at the timeline there. Yeah, Man Who Shot Liberty Valance was 1962. Chitty Chitty Bang Bang was released in December of 68, and so his family wasn't seeing it until a year after that. But I guess I don't know enough about release dates to know that. Did they just slide it forward into the Troubles, or maybe Belfast didn't get it until that late, or maybe he just kind of put it in the wrong time just to kind of make it all fit within the story. Either way is possible. Everlasting Love, the song that I had never even given a second thought about before, that just devastated me in this film, it's been recorded several times. It was written by Buzz Cason and Mac Gaden, but the version that must have been in the film, I'm guessing, there was a 1967 version of it that was a big hit by Robert Knight. So I'm going to guess that's the version that they had in the film, but I'm not enough of a music expert to know that. But
the only gripe that I have with this movie, and it's not even the movie's fault, it's actually I think the fault of the theater that I went to.
Oh no.
But so because the movie was in black and white, and I'm not sure if if there is like a projectionist or someone who knows about projectors that is listening to this, please email us and tell me what this issue is. But for some reason, there were these little, like, a green artifact on one side and a pink artifact on the other side of, like, anything that was, like, contrast. So, like, you would have, like, you know, a face against, like, a, you know, would be pretty bright in the black and white versus a darker background. You would have this, like, green artifact on the, well, as you're looking at it on the left side, and then a pink one on the other side. And it was, like, it was just enough to where it was, like, a little bit distracting. And I know that's not the movie's fault because I've seen other clips of the movie and that's not on purpose. They didn't make the movie like that.
Right.
But it was just kind of weird.
It's interesting you say that because I hadn't thought about it since I left the theater, but now that you say that, I don't remember green, but I think I remember seeing a completely different theater, obviously in different states here, little pink artifacts.
Yeah. And it's most noticeable if they're shooting like a doorway because it's a perfectly straight line.
Yeah.
And you would see a little green kind of smudge on one side and a little pink smudge on the other side. Almost like, you know, those should have been like overlapped to make whatever shade of gray they wanted to make. But it was just like out of phase a little bit.
I wonder if it's imperfections with either the camera equipment or the screens themselves, because mine was in different spots. It was like kind of like in the bottom center and kind of on the bottom or on the left center. So it was almost like different spots. I almost wonder if it's like, we were looking at a giant black and white screen on this modern equipment, or either the lenses or the screens somehow distorting something where it changes the color. Like if you get a bump in that screen, is it being projected around a bump and it's altering the way the color is bouncing back to your eye? Again, I'm just kind of guessing.
Maybe, but it wasn't like just one spot that stayed there. It was like along the edge on the actual image, and then it would move with the image. So, like if it's a person's face, as they would move, the artifact would stay, you know, on wherever it was and move. So I don't know if there was like an issue with like a projector lens or a bulb or the screen itself. I'm not entirely sure.
Yeah, I'd be curious to see what causes that.
But in the full color parts, like when they're showing Chitty Chitty Bang Bang and when they're showing the Christmas Carol scene, like there were no artifacts, but it was just so easy to spot and distracting in the black and white because it's like the whole thing is black and white except for this green line and this pink line.
And let's see. So actually, let me leave right here. So depending on when we release this, I might leave this spot open right now to say what it all just got nominated for at the Oscars. You know what I'm saying? Because that might be when I decide to release it, is right after the Oscar nominations come out or something. So I can actually do that and insert that here.
Yeah. Congratulations, Katrina Balfe, on your Oscar nomination, I'm sure. Probably Judi Dench, too. Karen Hines, I hope. I have really enjoyed watching Karen Hines in like movies over the years. I think he's incredibly underrated as an actor, and I loved his performance in the movie. I didn't even know that he was Irish.
Oh, huh.
I had seen him play so many different, you know, characters in different movies.
I know him most from Julius Caesar in Rome.
Okay. I know him. I think it's because it's probably the first thing that I like saw him and recognized him in, but as the Russian president in The Sum of All Fears.
Oh, that's funny.
I think it gets a Best Picture nomination. Probably Kenneth Branagh as director.
Oh, then I think it gets original screenplay.
Yep, screenplay.
It can also get like costumes and stuff. Like Mary, when a movie gets really popular, it starts getting all those too. Yeah.
Yeah, I maybe in editing,
right? Because
there are a lot of cool editing stuff that they do. I really thought it was funny when he talks about when Jamie Dornan says, "Oh, I'm not Catholic because that's too much of a religion of fear for me," and then it immediately cuts to a Protestant preacher. It's a super close up, like
fire
he's
and brimstone,
sweating, and he's like, "Eternal damnation if you don't, believe in God." Like I thought that was so funny.
And then they pass around the plate, and the kids are like giving them money, like thanks, it was really good.
Yeah. I think Katrina Balfe gets a nomination for. Probably supporting actress.
I think supporting. I think you're looking at this movie. The kid is the lead, and everyone else is supporting.
Yeah. I think if this movie only gets if it gets one acting nomination, I think it's Katrina Balfe.
Okay, I like that prediction. Looking at the again, we're recording this on December 5th, but the current Gold Derby Oscar predictions. have The Power of the Dog as the favorite for Best Picture, followed closely by Belfast.
Okay.
And then King Richard actually lists as third, West Side Story, which hasn't been released yet, so no one's actually really seen it, as fourth, Dune fifth. So that's kind of the current top 5. Anyway, yeah, so we will see when those nominations come out. And that is the film Belfast that we both highly recommend. So check it out. And thanks for listening to this bonus episode. And let's see, we're probably just about done with our tournament and getting ready to talk about the show The Crown when this will air. So thanks for listening, and see you later.